Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and thank you for coming along tonight. Can I first start with just doing a little bit of housekeeping? The toilets are straight out that door. You go slightly down the hall back towards the lifts, and there's another hallway to your right that will take you to the restrooms. In case of a fire, look for the SBS people because I think they'll be the first ones out of the room. Look, thank you very much for coming and welcome to the inaugural Sbs and Qis, the Queensland Intercultural Society Media Iftar dinner. I greet you with the traditional Muslim salutation of Assalamu Alaikum. Translated means peace be upon you. My name is Gail Kerr. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Access Community Services Limited, and I'm a member of the SBS Community Advisory Committee. And this is how my invitation to MC tonight came about. And I have to say that I'm very, very pleased to be here with you, and I'm very pleased that SBS is in Brisbane. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we meet on tonight, the Turrbal people, and can I pay my respects to their elders and leaders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of our co-hosts for this evening, starting with Mr Peter Cahill, who's the SBS Director of Corporate Affairs. Thank you, Peter. And also Mr Abdul Jalil Galin, who's the Executive Director of the Queensland Intercultural Society. I'd also like to acknowledge the Consul Generals, the Ministers, federal and state parliamentarians, members of the Diplomatic Corps, councillors representing the many and diverse communities of Australia, representatives from state and federal police, the media, academics, religious and community leaders present, and all of our other distinguished guests. Welcome. It's indeed a tremendous honour and a privilege to have all of you here this evening in this breaking of the fast, a time sacred to over 1.5 billion Muslims across the world, including more than 476 Australian Muslims, quite significant numbers. The Muslim fast begins just before dawn and it ends at sunset. It's not only a time to abstain from food and drink, but also a time to discipline one's character, keeping them focused on their true purpose of creation. It's a time to reflect on God, family, and humanity at large. A time of thanksgiving, charity, and self-sacrifice. The fast ends with a call to prayer at sunset. Before I welcome the Quran reciter, I would like to advise those who would like to pray that there are facilities made available. They're upstairs and you'll find signs directing you to those facilities. So can I now invite Imam Abdul Ghazali to do the call to prayer, also known as the Adhan. Thank you.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Thank you, Imam Ghazali, for your beautiful recitation of Call to Prayer. I'd like to remind everyone that prayer facilities, as I mentioned before, have been set up upstairs, and there are directions outside of the ballroom, just outside the door, indicating where you need to go. But can we request your patience at this time, because there has been time allocated for the prayer part of this segment. So if you could remain seated while we go through this part of the program. So for those of us who would like to perform their evening prayers, can now do so by going upstairs to the prayer area. Dinner will be served now, so what I'd like to say is Afiyet olsun, which is translated in Turkish, bon appetit. Thank you. Dinner will be served. Aforementioned books are not explicitly included in the Quran, but they are acknowledged and recognised therein as the Word of God. The Quran also refers to many events from Jewish and Christian scriptures, some of which are retold in comparatively distinctive ways from the Bible and the Torah, while obligatory referring to other events described explicitly in those texts. Interestingly, the Quran reveres the Virgin Mary and the miracle birth of Jesus. It also makes more references to the prophets, Abraham, Moses and Jesus, than it does to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Could I now invite Imam Mr. Abdul Ghazali to the stage for the recitation from the Holy Quran.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن آياته أن خلقكم من تراب ثم إذا أنتم بشر تنتشرون ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين ومن آياته منامكم بالليل والنهار وابتغاؤكم من فضله فضله إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يسمعون ومن آياته يريكم البرق خوفا وطمعا وينزل من السماء ماء فيحيي به الأرض بعد موتها إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يعقلون ومن آياته أن تقوم السماء والأرض بأمره ثم إذا دعاكم دعوة من الأرض إذا أنتم تخرجون وله من في السماوات والأرض كل له قانتون وهو الذي يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده وهو أهون عليه وله المثل الأعلى في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam Ghazali, for your beautiful recitation. Ladies and gentlemen, just before we start with the welcome speeches, I just wanted to draw your attention in your SBS goodie bags that you would have found colourfully placed on your chairs. You'll find nomination forms for the 2015 Australian of the Year Awards. For over 50 years, these awards have been celebrating and acknowledging the achievements of so many Australians from all walks of life, and SBS is proud to be a sponsor of the awards. I'd encourage you to think about the people around you, those who you might know personally or admire from afar, who are inspirational role models, contributing to our diverse nation, and consider nominating them for one of the 4 categories: Australian of the Year, Senior Australian, Young Australian, or Australia's Local Hero. Nominations will close on the 1st of August 2014, and so SBS and QIS would like to spread the message as far and wide to our cold population, our interfaith and our community leaders here tonight. Now, back to the program. These iftar dinners are held to bring people of different backgrounds together for the purpose of relating with each other as the common denominator. Without distinction, you will see around people from diverse segments of society, and so it makes it important for SBS and their many representatives to be here tonight and to meet with us, the Queensland community. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce a very important man, our co-host, Peter Cahill, the SBS Director of Corporate Affairs, for him to give us his welcome speech. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Gail. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I'll try Turkish as well. İyi akşamlar. That's right. Good evening, everybody. And really welcome and thank you all for joining us at this media iftar dinner. Can I start too by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Turrbal people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I do also want to acknowledge a couple of special guests that we have here today. Mr Robert Cavalucci, the Assistant Minister for Multicultural Affairs and Member for Brisbane Central. Mrs Desley Scott, the Deputy Opposition Whip, Shadow Minister for Disability Services, Community Services, Multicultural Affairs and Women and Mental Health. Mrs Jane Prentice, the Federal Member for Ryan, who had to leave a little bit early. Mr John Mickle, the retired Speaker of the House, who will be speaking later. Dr Jim Chalmers, the Federal Member for Rankin. Ms Terry Butler, Federal Member for Griffith. Mr Ian Stewart, Commissioner for Queensland Police. And of course our Queensland board member, one and only Queensland board member for SBS, Mr Bill Lenehan. He's trying to get more board members from Queensland, so he's working on it. A big thank you to Mr Abdul Selil Galim, the Executive Director and Co-Founder of the Queensland Intercultural Society. Mr Serge Volochenko, who I just met earlier, who's with the Ethnic Communities Council of Queensland. Thank you for coming. Mr Ricardo Viana, President of the Multicultural Communities Council, the Gold Coast. And a special acknowledgement to Ms Gail Kerr, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Access Community Services, and also, just as importantly I think, a member of the Community Advisory Committee for SBS. Our MC for this evening, thank you very much. This is SBS's first iftar dinner in Queensland. We've done a couple in Sydney and Melbourne in the past couple of years, but it's certainly the first one we've done in Queensland during the holy month of Ramadan, and so we take this opportunity during Ramadan to break the fast at sunset and share a meal with all of our friends. In 2012, SBS partnered with the Australian Intercultural Society in Melbourne for the first iftar dinner, and in 2013 we did partner with the SBS Affinity Intercultural Foundation in Sydney to celebrate Eid dinners, and I'm very pleased that we're able to do so in Brisbane as well this year. We're fortunate to have the opportunity to share past Eid dinners and tonight's iftar dinner with so many prominent members of Queensland's government, interfaith and multicultural communities, academic and media sectors. We'd really like to thank the Queensland Intercultural Society for the opportunity to co-sponsor this important event. Both organisations work to encourage community harmony and try to be catalysts for social cohesion. Australia has an incredibly rich and uniquely diverse multicultural society, and occasions like these provide the opportunity to acknowledge and to celebrate the diversity that defines our country. For Australia's Muslim communities, Ramadan is a time of reflection and spiritual rejuvenation. It is also a time for family and friends and communities to come together, as we do tonight, in a spirit of mutual respect and understanding. I became personally familiar with iftar meals through my parents, Coptic Christians, who migrated from Egypt almost 40 years ago in the late 60s, and they migrated to Melbourne. They told me of their experience in Egypt during the 50s and 60s, where iftar meals were a time at which both Muslims and Christians in Egypt would sit together and break bread with an understanding of each other and an easy tolerance. Often Muslim Egyptians would also participate in many of the Coptic Christian fasts, even when they didn't fall in the same time as Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan. The Egypt and the broader Middle East of my parents' generation was a time of more tolerance, sadly not reflected in the brutality, violence and agonising sectarianism that we witness there today. But here in Australia, and this is very important, we are so fortunate to have that peace and tolerance, so longed for in other parts of the world, where Muslim, Christian, Jew, Hindi, Buddhist and those of no faith at all, frankly, can share a meal together in peace and understanding. In fact, if it wasn't for the intervention of a Muslim family, I wouldn't be standing here today. Particularly, if I could share this with you, when I was 3 years old, and a very chubby 3-year-old, at an iftar dinner at some friends of ours, I went and reached for a dessert cookie called a kahk. It's an Egyptian sweet which has dates inside. It's shortbread with dates inside, covered in icing sugar, and of course, being rather hungry, I stuffed the whole thing down my mouth in one go, and it got stuck in my throat. So my aunt Tanta Farida, who's our close family friend, my mum panicked, started screaming because I was turning blue, but she basically saved my life, put her hand down my throat and pulled it out. So my iftar experience is not only one of friends and family, but also some life-saving manoeuvres from Muslim family members. SBS is really proud to co-sponsor this event. We see our role as the most diverse broadcaster in Australia as a crucial contributor to the development and maintenance of social cohesion in our society. And you all know that the media plays a very critical role in furthering social inclusion. It shapes the way in which we think about ourselves and each other and the world. All of us here tonight know how the media is crucial to social harmony as it shapes the ways we think about each other and understand that world, especially in a culturally diverse country like ours. Media can either make us feel very proud of who we are and make us feel that we belong, or prevent us from doing so, depending on what kind of media content it is. The SBS of today is vastly different from the two radio frequency that evolved in 1975. It's more relevant and important today in many ways because Australia's cultural diversity actually has increased and become far more complex than 1975. There are over 270 languages and cultures in Australia, twice as many people who speak a language other than English than when the SBS was first established back then. And they come from a far more diverse range of countries and cultures than 30 years ago. We at SBS have evolved into a fully fledged media organisation across all platforms and devices. Today we're a modern multimedia network that operates 5 television channels, both SBS 1 and 2, the multi-channel, the National Indigenous Television station, and 2 other channels on Foxtel, World Movies and Studio. We also broadcast on our radio networks in 74 different languages. So that's news and current affairs programs, really more languages than any other broadcaster in the world. In fact, the BBC World broadcasts in 27 languages. I think the Vatican broadcasts in 32, and little old SBS does 74 languages, and that's a significant achievement for the broadcaster. And we have musical digital stations as well, such as SBS Pop Asia, Pop Desi, which is Indian music, Pop Arabi, which some of you might put the app on your phone for, and SBS Chill as well as Pop Brazil. While others in the media sector may be threatened by the convergence and the way that technology has increased competition for audience attention, the digital explosion has vastly expanded our capacity and SBS's capacity to extend our reach and services to so many of those communities that I mentioned. Around 90% of our television content and all of our radio content is online, so you can get it online on the SBS On Demand service. And we have a wonderful catch-up service, which is SBS On Demand, as well as so many different apps, including ones that you can get those radio programs if you wish. We also have distribution business for books and DVDs and even a monthly food magazine called Feast. And the explosion of satellite and internet services has meant that those who wish can actually get access to their home country news in any way they want. But it's important that SBS continues to play its role, because what we do is actually provide language services on the radio of Australian news and current affairs in language, which they can't get on the internet and satellite so much from those home countries. And it really does help new migrants and even older migrants stay in touch with Australia and feel part of this country. So in many ways, I believe that we're no longer, if we ever were, the ethnic broadcasters some people have talked to us about. We've evolved to be a significant player in the Australian media landscape, and because Australia is so diverse, we define ourselves as being there for all Australians. Our charter, and we have an SBS charter, and purpose is to inspire all Australians to explore and appreciate our diverse world, and by doing so contribute to an inclusive and cohesive society. We try and provoke debate, we try and push boundaries, and we try and surprise audiences and inspire change, and we do so with a great deal of cultural respect as well. We showcase that cultural, linguistic and diversity of faith that is critical to Australia's success as a migrant nation. We try and help all Australians, no matter where they are from or when they arrived in this country, to understand and value the diversity that makes this country such a great country. And I should pay special thanks to the Turkish Australian community, which have been really an important part of Australia's immigration story and have made such important contributions to the rich diversity of contemporary Australia. Some of you may know here, many of you are from a Turkish background, that the immigration to Australia from Turkey was initially in low numbers as early as the 19th century, but Turkish migrants became the first major Muslim religious group to arrive in Australia in the years after World War II. There were others, there were some Afghan and other groups. But it was only after the 1967 bilateral agreement between the Turkish and Australian governments that facilitated assisted migration to Australia that significant numbers of Turkish people came to Australia in the 60s and 70s, and this was later boosted by many family reunion programs. Almost 60,000 speak Turkish at home, and there's, I think, although Abdul has told me, I thought there was 13,000 in Queensland, but he said, where are they? They're hiding. I can't see them anywhere. I think most of them are here tonight. But there are 13,000, according to census figures, Turkish Australians or Turks born in Queensland. The largest community, of course, is from my home state in Victoria. And it's a community that has maintained a proud heritage while adapting and contributing to life in Australia, which I think is a very important part of that migrant success story. And of course, we all know as Australians the special relationship between Turkey and Australia, which was crucially forged in the battles at Gallipoli. Next year is going to be a very important year for both countries. It was a pivotal moment, especially in the development of Australian national identity. So there is a strong connection between the two nations, created amidst many losses and sacrifices of both those countries in that very terrible war 100 years ago. And it was described by Kemal Ataturk in 1934, tribute to those who died in Gallipoli, and it's worth repeating it here tonight, and I quote, he said, "Heroes who shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country, therefore rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and Mehmets to us, where they lie side by side here in this country of ours. You, the mothers who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well." This message is inscribed in the Ataturk Memorial in Turkana Bay in Gallipoli and at the Kemal Ataturk Memorial in Canberra. We remember tonight, or we should remember tonight, this shining example of the spirit of brotherhood and tolerance that emerged so incredibly from such a savage conflict. It teaches us that this type of tolerance that we have here in Australia requires continued effort. It's not just luck, it's not just fortune, it's all of our efforts combined. It's the effort to participate in a dinner like this tonight, as small as that may be, but it's also a degree of courage from all of us to maintain it, even when there are difficult times. And we should reflect on this as we join together in this iftar meal tonight. And I should also sign off by just warning you about the desserts. Be careful when you eat them, because there might be some cookies there as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Peter. I think everyone can see why SBS is the great organisation that it is, and it is true to what it stands for. Can I also just ask now to join us, our other co-host for the evening, Abdul Jalila, Executive Director of Queensland Intercultural Society, to give his welcome speech. Thank you, Jalil.
Thank you, Gail. Distinguished federal and state parliamentarians, diplomatic corps, consul generals, member of media, academia, respected guests from mosques, churches and synagogues, community and multi-faith leaders, ladies and gentlemen. And also I would like to acknowledge Freya. She is with us tonight, and also Alex Douglas. He is with us tonight also. On behalf of Queensland Intercultural Society, it is my great honour to warmly welcome each and every one of you this evening to this wonderful Media Iftar dinner, which is co-hosted by SBS and QIS. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you who have participated in this event. Without your support and presence, this dinner would have no significance. I would like to thank our co-host, Special Broadcasting Service, SBS. I believe this is the first Media Iftar dinner in Queensland with Muslim community and also wider community. I would like to congratulate SBS, which takes very important role to embrace Muslim community, and again, congratulate SBS again to take big roles for Australian multiculturalism also. By co-hosting and supporting such meaningful event at the Hilton Hotel, has become a catalyst and plays an instrumental role towards breaking barriers, stereotypes, bigotry, and towards our shared goal of building the ideal cohesive society, inclusive and harmonious society, as well as promoting community harmony, dialogue, and friendship. This iftar would not have measured up to the symbolic objective of being inclusive of everyone if it wasn't for their support. Ramadan is a month, is a climate of compassion and mercy. In these blessed days, when patience and tolerance and acceptance prevail, we once more remember love, peace, modesty, cooperation, and bridging dialogue gap among different cultures, as well as the members of the society we live in Australia. It is during this month of Ramadan, Muslims observe fasting. These are very important themes for Muslims in the month of Ramadan, from the personal spiritual development to worship, to sacrifice, empathy, and charity. Outside the spirit of personal spirit comes the social round, and that is, of course, sharing of the meal, the breaking of the fast with family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, and wider community. This is what we are doing this evening, understanding and bringing people together in the spirit of Ramadan. By sharing iftar dinner together, by love and opening our arms to each other, we can have much greater opportunities to create a better world for all of us. We feel honored and privileged to not only sharing the meal, but to having shared over a decade of interaction with a group of people that stand as we do for love, justice, peace, and harmony. For SBS and Qis, tonight is one of the most special dinner in the holy month of Ramadan. Tonight is a good reminder of how far we have come as an organization. This year, Queensland Intercultural Society, we have hosted more than 15 VIP home iftar dinners and organized peace and dialogue iftar dinner at the Queensland Parliament House that they are all interfaith and intercultural in nature. Here, I would like to sincerely thank the 15 host families for extending their hospitality to us. Also, I would like to thank our guests for accepting and participating at such meaningful gathering, coming together, sharing food around the table with people from various cultures, faith members, both sides to know each other and see that most worries about each other stem from pointless, groundless ignorance. It is wonderful to see that the demand for home iftar is increasing significantly every year, which contributes greatly to the social cohesion and multiculturalism of Australia. It is pleasing to witness that Ramadan is becoming a month for everyone, a month where old friendships are strengthened and new friendships are made. Coming together here at the one table is really a situation of richness, and this table fellowship offers remarkable opportunities to mutual understanding, sympathy, acceptance, and friendship for creating a society rooted in common values. Iftar dinner is a means to unite people across religious, national, and ethnic boundaries. Tonight's union demonstrates that in society people can come together and live together regardless of faith, ethnicity, or dissimilar worldviews. Tonight is a celebration of diversity, and we sincerely hope that this gathering benefits all. In Qis, we see it is an obligation to remind each other to love, respect, or at least communicate with one another. In particular, when we live in a wonderful country like Australia, it is important to achieve a society which exemplifies social harmony, cohesion, and understanding. Just tonight, I would like to say a few words about today's world facing some problem, and also it was before also facing same problem. One is ignorance, poverty, and social injustice. We can overcome with this problem with education, good education, and businessmen working together and communicate together to help poor people. And also, when we are busy, we can help our community a lot. And another things, in the Quranic verses, today's world, one of the ignorance is one of the biggest problem, I can say. As you know, all around the world, we are facing many problems, especially in Middle East and some area in the world. So, in the Quran says, when you kill one innocent person, you kill whole humanity. Even Old Testament and New Testament saying same thing. We have to protect the values of human being. That is so important. For that reason, as a Muslim, we are saying, if we are human being, we can help the others. If we are not good human being, we can't be true Muslim also. That is so important. Whoever killing anyone all around the world, name of the God or religious, they can't be religious person, or they can't do anything name of the God. I can mention about that also. Once again, I thank SBS and members for their support with this initiative, and I hope to continue working with SBS side by side in promoting a more harmonious society. Once again, I wish this special time of the year for the Muslim community will open the doors of mercy, open all of us. I greet everyone with deepest respect. I wish the peace and blessing of Ramadan be upon you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abdul Jalil. I think we can see why his speech was so important. It was indeed warm and welcoming and very generous. Thank you. And we also want to thank again our co-hosts for this fantastic event and for this evening's iftar dinner. Thank you. We have a keynote presentation, and it's a great honour for me tonight to be able to introduce that person. From tonight, I think there's no doubt that many new friendships will be formed and opportunities to connect. So as well as we deepen those existing relationships, iftar dinners also provide a time to share experiences. To provide the keynote presentation for this evening, I would like to read you a brief bio on our keynote, the Honourable John McKell. John was born in Mergen, west of Gympie, in 1953, and I jokingly said to him before, great, you're older than me. Before his family moved to Ipswich and then to Brisbane when he was very young. He holds a Master's in Literary Studies, as well as degrees in Arts and Education and a Diploma of Teaching. He's married and he has 3 children. Before entering the Queensland Parliament, he worked as a senior policy advisor at a state and federal level. He has formerly been a university lecturer, a tutor and a teacher. He served as Minister for 7 portfolios in 5 years, from 2004 to 2009, before his appointment to the role of Speaker from 2009 to 2012. He represented Australia on the executive of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association on the Finance Subcommittee. Now he is a part-time university lecturer, a member of a number of advisory boards for private organisations, and a member of an advisory board for a mining company. And, as we will see tonight, also takes on many guest speaking roles. Please welcome to the stage John McKell.
Well, thank you very much, Gail. I must say, after an introduction like that, I feel so important I can hardly wait to hear what I've got to say. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I do thank our sponsors for bringing us together tonight on what I know is an occasion when you're eating together, problems can be resolved, prejudices can be overcome. That's what I thought would happen. But as always with these things, there was an altercation before that I thought was going to turn quite ugly. It turned over coffee as to whether the Turkish coffee was the real thing or whether it should be Egyptian coffee or whether the Greeks had their own version of it. Now, I'm a guest with Father Dimitri of the Greek Orthodox Church on Sunday night. Father, you'll be pleased to know that I stood up valiantly for the Greek version of events. But on the other hand, I was convinced by the people sitting around me who outnumbered me that perhaps Turkey did have a point. Ladies and gentlemen, some years ago, I was the guest of Dr. Mohammed Abdullah. And at that lunch that he presided over was a young lady who was in a scarf. She belonged to the Muslim Women's League. She was a well-educated young lady. She worked as an accountant for KPMG. And her anguish to me was, when are we ever going to get accepted? When is the prejudice going to stop? I said, tell me about it. She said, I was driving the other day at the Sunshine Coast and I went to Mooloolaba and wanted to park my car. And as I reversed in, somebody beat me to it and wound down the window and yelled at me, why don't you get back to where you came from? I said, how'd you feel about that? She said, well, it's pretty terrible. I said, does it happen often? She said, well, perhaps more often than I'd want. I said, well, where do you come from? She said, Mount Gravatt. Well, where is she going to go back to? I mean, she's on the south side. It's heaven enough. My point is this, that unless we have occasions like this, then that sort of misinformation, that sort of bigotry gets carried on. Without overdoing it, I became aware of research that my sister has carried out of what would have been bigotry in my own family. My sister did some research and found that my family arrived in 1852 in Adelaide, probably from Germany. The people in South Australia, who are the original descendants of that arrival, call themselves Mickle, which was a complete revelation to us. My sister then uncovered that my father had been born in 1917 in a small country town in New South Wales. If you look at the war effort of Australia in the First World War, there was a huge effort by country Australians to that war. There was therefore deep suspicion of anybody with a German-sounding name. In fact, they were incarcerated. I guess my grandfather, sensing this, decided very swiftly to anglicise our name. My father, in turn, was the subject of bigotry by none other than my mother's parents when he came to get married. My mother was Irish Catholic. And there was no way in the world an Irish Catholic woman was going to marry a Lutheran of all things, unless he became a Catholic. So I went to one of those Catholic schools that Desley spoke about last week, where the state school kids used to throw rocks at the Catholic kids. So when Gail said I was old, I'm old, all right. My point is that we have adjusted to each thing. When Jim Chalmers went to Clairvaux, and that's the only sin I can ever find about you, Jim, he didn't go to St Lawrence's as he should have. He never encountered that because it had moved on. We heard tonight about the Turks who've come here, but that was also a huge wave of European migration. And it showed leadership to do that. The leadership of Sir Robert Menzies and Arthur Calwell when he was the Immigration Minister. Both together, in a bipartisan way, encouraged people to come from war-torn Greece, and where's my friend Robert, and your mum and dad to come from Italy. Did that mean that they had an easy run of it? They did not. The Italians and the Greeks were treated at that time with great suspicion, with all sorts of agony hurled at them. I don't need to repeat them tonight, but I spoke with Robert earlier in the day, and that is exactly what his mum and dad went through. But now, Robert's in Parliament. It's unexceptional to have someone whose mum and dad was an Italian representing us in the Parliament. And Father Dimitri is the guest of many people right across many religions. No big deal because we've moved on. Leadership was also shown in the 1970s, when after Australia's involvement in Vietnam, a whole lot of people came by boat seeking refuge in Australia. The Prime Minister of the day, Malcolm Fraser, welcomed those people. When I was a teacher in Inala, I got to know those people. I got to know one family and the escape that they had made from Vietnam at that time, where the oldest of them, as a 5-year-old, used to ride the bike with one very important mission each day, was to carry a cup full of petrol down towards a boat, whilst her father had been incarcerated at that change of regime. And after 2 years of faithfully every day carting that little cup so it wouldn't be noticed, they had enough petrol to get in a boat while Mum took the youngest baby, hoping like mad that in that last day the baby wouldn't cry. And they got on a boat and went to Malaysia and came to Darra. What is that family today? Well, Mum set up a small business. The oldest one is an engineer, the second one is a banker, the third one is a lawyer, and the fourth one is a lawyer. Aren't they making a wonderful contribution to this country? Just like a lot of the business people in this room are making a huge contribution to this country. And that's what our policies do. As a nation, when we welcome, that's what it does. In 1998, and as I look around the room, some of you would have suffered this. There was an election of somebody whose whole idea and whole experiences were out of a fish and chip shop. I was a teacher at university. And one kid put up his hand and said, "You know, I'm sick and tired of the government forcing multiculturalism down our throat." I said, "Gee, I haven't heard that before." I said, "How many of you feel like that?" And out of the 50 or so, most hands went up. I said, "Could I ask you one question? What's your favourite restaurant?" "Oh, I like the French one in the valley." "And your favourite?" "Oh, I like the Vietnamese one out at Anala." "And your favourite?" And around the room we went and we did the Thai, we didn't do sunshine kebabs, but we did everything else. I said, "I have one more question. What government forced you to go to the French restaurant? What government forced you to go to the Thai one?" "None." I said, "Well, I'm deeply ashamed of the whole lot of you. Not one of you stood up for an Australian steak at the Norman Hotel." And eventually we saw that one off too. Because the point is this, it's what I tried to tell the young lady. All these things evolve. And they evolve because of events like this, where when you break bread together and talk things through, eventually, what Abraham Lincoln said was right. You'll get the better angels of our nature. But if we have people who want to stand up, as happened in 1998, and that goes unchallenged, then once you release that genie of misrepresentation and bigotry and allow that to go unchallenged, then we become a poorer society for it. We are a richer society, we are an embracing society because of all the people who've come to us from lands across the sea. That's what's special about tonight, but it's also been the greatness of multiculturalism. Because it's people who want to make the decision to come here, who reinvigorate us, who are the productive people who share it. I want to finish with this last story. When I was a Member of Parliament, I was asked to go to a Laotian wedding. And one of the guests was a person who was right out of the 1998 textbook. Finally, it got the better of me. I said, "Alan, what are you doing here at this wedding?" He said, "They're my neighbours." I said, "Oh." He said, "Yeah, I want to tell you something." He said, "They're fair income refugees, not like those other bastards." What he meant was, when he was able to sit down with them, when they were talking, when they were together, all that other stuff broke down. Our challenge, your challenge, and the one you've asked us to meet tonight is to sit down and get to know one another, and all those things break down. Thank you for that opportunity. May God bless you all, and have a great Ramadan.
Honourable John McKell, thank you so much. That was just inspirational and indeed empowering and full of wisdom. We did have a speaker scheduled in to come after John, which is Associate Professor Mohammed Abdullah, who sadly, and very much at the last moment, has been unable to join us due to the poor health of his wife. And I'm sure we all know Mohammed. He is an exceptional individual. And I know that we are very disappointed he can't be with us, and I'm sure out of this day of peace and friendship and good wishes that we all send our best wishes and prayers to Mohammed and his wife and their family. But not to be taken off course, we have a very worthy representative to fill that spot. Can I invite Mr Murat Koskan, who is the Director of the Queensland Education and Cultural Foundation, to the stage? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm not even going to attempt to fill the shoes of Mohammed Abdullah. I mean that like literally and metaphorically as well. So it's a bit of a surprise, yeah. So it's been a bit of a surprise for me too. But I'm sure, like everybody else, my prayers are with Mohammed and his wife. And I must say, in this day of Ramadan, my prayers, and I'm sure everybody else's prayers, with many of those very, very unfortunate people around the world, you know, the Christians being evicted from their homes in Mosul, and, you know, people suffering in Gaza, and, you know, the hungry in Somali, the homeless in King's Cross, etc. So my prayers with all of them, and I hope they find an immediate solution for their problems. So we're talking on the topic of multiculturalism, and the best that I can do in this regard is talk about my own experience of multiculturalism. And I sort of, you know, interpret multiculturalism, whether or not it's a sort of a government policy, or, you know, whether or not it's a way of, you know, making society a better place, you know, a way of sort of coexistence beyond, you know, the concept of tolerance, you know, coexisting in a fashion where we embrace one another, where we sort of, you know, I don't know if it's too corny to say, but where we love one another. And I think to sort of get to that level, certain basic human needs, certain necessities have to be taken care of. There needs to be a sense of equality. There needs to be a sense of justice. You know, if someone doesn't have food in their tummy, or does not have a shelter over their heads, or haven't got assurance of the safety of their children, it's very, very difficult to talk to people about, you know, larger and wider sort of needs of society and making society a better place. Those imminent needs need to be taken care of. A Turkish scholar by the name of Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, in the turn of the century, like Abdul Jalil Gerim touched upon a little while ago, referring to especially the Muslim world at the time, talks that there were three sort of main instigators, three catalysts to the level of problems that there were in those societies. They were ignorance, it was poverty, and it was the consequent disunity and, you know, the breakdown in society there. These three elements, you know, have to be dealt with at the individual level. It's not good enough to just expect, you know, things from, you know, governments and, you know, for this, you know, for this freedom or for this education, or, you know, for a harmonious society to rain upon us, you know, from the skies. It means individual motivation. It means drive. You know, we have to have initiative, and we have to take steps to make this happen. The Gülen movement, a movement inspired by a scholar in Turkey, now living in the United States, Fethullah Gülen, or also known as the Hizmet movement, who Mohammed Abdullah at the Parliament Iftar, for those of us who were there, touched upon last week, is a movement of volunteers. To battle those three main catalysts of, you know, ignorance and poverty and disunity and fighting and whatnot, sort of some measures were sort of taken, some targets put into place, and they were to sort of, you know, battle ignorance with schools that would, you know, cater for such needs. The setting up, especially in the Gülen movement worldwide, the setting up of these schools, setting up of business chambers, associations, societies catered for business people together, and then organisations like QIS, Interfaith, Intercultural Dialogue Societies and Associations, and also some charitable organisations. So, you know, they're pretty much the three or four main sort of, you know, things that the Gülen movement are involved in. Just looking at all of those individually, back in the 60s, when, you know, the Gülen-inspired people and Fethullah Gülen started off on this path of, you know, trying to fight ignorance, the first thing that was done, they thought, well, we need to deal with this at a level of individuals. We have to deal with society itself, with the fabric of society made up of families, made up of people. Then they said we need to target this at a younger age when people are more open to ideas. So houses were set up first. So we're talking about homes, business people, families would have a home. They would lend their house to a group of students, and these students would be, tutored or with extracurricular activity, guided in this way, guided in a way to be more accepting of others, to be more cohesive with others, etc. I'm sort of just fast-forwarding it ahead. In a short period of time, these 1 houses, 5 houses, dozen houses, all of a sudden became hundreds and thousands of houses with, tens of thousands of students. So something on a wider scale, something that could cater for bigger numbers was required. So boarding colleges were set up, what we call yurts in Turkey. So boarding colleges were set up. Students of various age groups, high school, senior high school, university students would stay at these. They would board there. They would go to their schools, their day-to-day activities. And again, they would be tutored there, with their normal academia. Extracurricular activity would take place. They would be, guided, to do the right, to be more accepting, to be multicultural, to be cohesive, etc., etc. Boarding houses became not enough after a while, and schools were set up. The first of these schools was set up in Izmir in Turkey in the early 80s. I'm lucky enough to have graduated from one of these schools. I actually graduated from the first of these schools from Izmir, called Yamanlar College. I graduated in 1992 from that high school and then come to Australia to study university, and I was the 4th year level graduate. I was one of 46 students, 47 students that graduated that year, and over 40 of my friends that I graduated with are scattered all over the world at the moment, teaching at these schools. My wife also is a teacher at one of these schools, at Wisdom College in Brisbane. So the schools at the moment, they have a presence in over 160 countries. And the schools are numbered in the thousands. So I don't know how many schools there are, but they're numbered in the thousands. And there are schools in a lot of the Africas. There are schools in the United States, in Europe. 18 of these schools are in Australia, teaching and encouraging these noble things that we've been talking about, that John has been talking about, that the Quran encourages. Okay, moving on. The next level of activity that the Gülen movement is heavily involved in are the business chambers. So the business chambers organise people that are sympathetic to the movement, organise for them to get together, to look for business opportunities, to introduce new people to business, to make links with other business groups in other areas. Whilst the motivation here is to encourage business and business opportunities, it is actually to encourage the funding and the financing of the school activities, the charitable activities. There are many examples of people not very wealthy, people with very, very modest incomes that give a vast majority of their earnings so that schools, whilst they may live in Turkey or whilst they may live somewhere else, so that schools in Vietnam, schools in Bangladesh, schools in Africa would be established. Cities or little towns would actually sponsor the groups of businessmen in smaller towns comparable to Bundaberg or to Gympie or to Chinchilla and whatnot, will actually sponsor a city in an African country. They would sponsor a city in an Asian country. And it would be their responsibility to set up that school in that country. Then it would be their responsibility to fund the teachers that would go to that country to teach and to educate the needy of that country. We also have one of those business organisations here in Brisbane. It's called AIMA, Active Young Merchants Association, involved in that kind of activity as well. The next level of activity that the Gülen movement, the Gülen-inspired movement would be heavily involved in are the charitable organisations. Kimse Yok Mu is the main organisation in Turkey, set up in the early 90s. Involved, where there is a disaster, they would be one of the first people on site to assist and to help with that kind of relief. They would organise iftar dinners for those that are needy and do not have anywhere to go. I know that in Gaza, I know that in Somalia, in Sudan, every day, dozens of thousands of food hampers are handed out for the people that require an iftar dinner. And not only during Ramadan, outside of Ramadan also, they are heavily involved in that activity. I know that the Australia Relief Organisation out of Sydney actually had this week an iftar dinner on the street for the homeless at King's Cross also. They had that activity due to happen this week also. So that's another level of... So after natural disasters, those that are needy, that are poor, that require assistance with shelter or food, also educational bursaries. So, students that have got potential, that want to study, that want an education but don't have the ability to fund their education, they would provide, the charity organisations would provide bursaries for them also. Beyond these, formal organisations and whatnot, the Gulen-inspired movement also encourage just social interaction, because that is that's what, forms the fabric, that quality fabric of our society. The dinners that we have at homes, the family gatherings that we have, the picnics that we have, the games of soccer or volleyball or what it may be that we have and get together, the laughs, the giggles, the Turkish teas, Turkish Greek or Egyptian teas, whatever they mean, the coffees. It's just that, gathering and enjoying one another's company that helps us to know one another and understand one another, and consequently not tolerate one another, because toleration could be a little bit pretentious, but not to tolerate, but to actually embrace one another. This is what I have learned, in my experience of multiculturalism. I think, and there would be a few catalysts to that. I would say that, to me, father figures like, Bob Atkinson and certainly John McKell and, Ian Stewart and the like. Being Australian, I haven't had a very negative experience in Australia, to be honest. I've enjoyed being an Australian, and I really haven't been persecuted or stereotyped or anything. I've actually had quite a good experience, and this is what I see as being Australian. What I am taught from Islam and what I'm taught from the Quran and the way the Gulen movement inspires me is that, I think I would rather die, in the path of trying to encourage and, multiculturalism and social cohesion and loving my neighbour and living that way and sharing my life, sharing the beauties that I have in life and sharing the problems that I have in life with my neighbours, with my fellow humans, than to live in a society, in a homogeneous society that, whether or not it's a Muslim society or a non-Muslim society that, dictates what people do and that do not embrace and accept others. Islam, the Gulen movement, teaches me that I'm a human first, and I need to embrace my fellow humans as family members first, and I'm a Muslim or a Turkish person or an Australian person second. So that is my experience with regards to multiculturalism. Sorry, I could not be in a Muhammad Abdullah, but so thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Murat. I think we all agree they're big shoes to fill, but can I say, I think Muhammad should be looking over his shoulder. Those shoes might be under threat. Well done. Look, we're moving on now to a more soothing part of the segment in our program tonight. The Turkish classic music, the Sufism, is generally understood to be the inner mystical dimension of Islam. Classical Sufi scholars have defined Sufism as a science without objective, is the repatriation of the heart and turning it away from all else but God. Often this is expressed through a life of humility and godliness. At other times this is characterised by movement, such as the whirling devices and spiritual music. To entertain us with a performance of spiritual music, I'd like to welcome Seckin Bey, and the group name is Istanbul Groove. Welcome to the stage.
Sen gidince
and inviting them to come forward and do a very brief speech or presentation to us. We have amongst us tonight people who have dedicated their life to community work, both in a professional and a voluntary capacity. As these dinners are organised to share experiences, we have invited a few of you to share your thoughts on how we could strive together towards social harmony and through collaboration. Can I first invite Mr Robert Cavallucci, MP, Assistant Minister for Multicultural Affairs, State Member for Brisbane Central. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gail, and good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. And can I start by acknowledging traditional owners, as is always good and proper to do. Earlier this evening, I was sitting next to Father Dimitri, and we were talking a little about some of the things we take for granted, and I think that might be a good segue into something I might start with tonight about how great it is that we live in this country. We're free to live in this country and in this great state and this fabulous New World City, free to come together as a community to celebrate everything it is that we love about living in Australia. Before I move on, I probably forgot to acknowledge the Honourable John McKell and thank him for his very kind words and inspirational speech as always. It's always good that you're able to wind in stories about what it was like to be a migrant and grow up to be a son of migrants in this country, and I thank you for that. Could I also acknowledge the many state and federal parliamentary colleagues who are here this evening, members of the QPS, other faith leaders, respected imams, and of course, how could I forget the many representatives of SBS and the media, and I take this opportunity to convey my love and affection for all of the media in this country as well. But just back on that sort of reflection I had about earlier about what it's like to live in this country, and if I might just focus on what it's like to live in Queensland, being a Queensland parliamentarian, and talk a little bit about how wonderfully culturally diverse we are here in Queensland. 220 different nationalities comprise Queensland, with many different languages and over 100 different beliefs or religious faith systems. And I think that's important, and we recognise that fact because that's exactly what we're here tonight. Tonight here, as the sun's setting on another very holy day in Ramadan, we get together to celebrate this time of reflection and with the opportunity to break bread and share a meal and have dialogue between each other at the table, to break down barriers where there may have been barriers before. After tonight, for many of you, there won't be. And it's important that we do celebrate Iftar in ways like we are tonight, because not only is it meaningful for our many Queensland Muslims who are here, it's also meaningful for very many of us non-Muslims who are here tonight, as it is for all of us right across Queensland. It's important because it makes our lives as Queenslanders richer and our society harmonious, and it's much more meaningful for all of us to be a part of it. So I wish you all a solemn evening. Ramadan Mubarak. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And he's delayed his departure. He has 2 other engagements, so thank you, Robert, for waiting around. Can I now invite Ian Stewart, Queensland Police Commissioner, to the stage.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. It is an absolute privilege to be here again. Can I just say before the acknowledgements that I'm actually very, very glad that Ramadan is coming to a close. And I don't say that with any disrespect at all. But this is my 4th iftar, the 2nd in a row. Last night I had the absolute privilege, and Abdul, thank you again, to be home hosted with my dear wife and one of my colleagues in the home of a Muslim family here in Brisbane, and it was an absolute delight. It really was. And if ever there's a program that breaks down barriers, it's that one, because it is very much simply people enjoying each other's company, respecting each other's cultures, and enjoying the night. So can I congratulate the Muslim community in this state, and I know that there are other examples of this around Australia and even around the world. But I really do believe it is one of the great things that you do to break those barriers down. Yes, if you join with me in thanking the community. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge our co-host tonight and our sponsors, SBS, and truly thank them for putting on such a wonderful evening again tonight. I'd like to acknowledge all of the very, very special people in this room. And if ever there was diversity, look in this room alone at the different cultures that are represented here tonight, but also the different walks of life that are represented here, from our political leaders, from our great friends who work in our judicial processes, to old colleagues, certainly to the consular corps, to those who believe very, very strongly in the multiculturalism of Australia and the diversity of Australia through the Ethnic Council, to our religious leaders, to those who do just such a wonderful job in bringing us all together in so many ways. I congratulate the co-hosts on this first inaugural SBS-hosted dinner here along with the QIS. I really do congratulate you for a wonderful evening, and I hope this is the first of many to come in successive years. And certainly it's an absolute privilege for me and my colleagues to be here. And I'd just like to give you a demonstration of the support and the importance that we place in our relationship with diversity as an organisation by simply asking my colleagues in the room to stand up. If you wouldn't mind just for a moment. All of my colleagues to stand up. Thank you. Not only do you have three members of the senior executive besides myself here, we have local senior officers, we have junior officers, not so junior, middle rank, but and we have one of my deputy commissioners who's here tonight as well with his wife, and who is also a member of our organisation. My point is this: we believe in cultural diversity in this state. We support cultural diversity, and in particular, our relationship with the Muslim community is one that is very, very important to us. Thank you again for your kind invitation. Thank you for the wonderful presentations that were made tonight. It strengthens and enriches all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Can I invite now Dimitri Tsakis, the Archiepiscopal Vicar for Queensland, Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of Australia. Dimitri.
Friends, I'm a little bit older than Robert, so I lived the great Christian-Muslim alliance when I was at high school, when we would meet in Musgrave Park to have our fights with the skip kids. When I did my master's a long time ago in international relations, I realised that Australia is a very special place, and poetry, I think, is a way where we can capture many realities and many dimensions very quickly. And so there's a poem that I'd like to read to you that I think captures the type of world that the rest of the world is looking for, and the frustrations that exists in places like Egypt, the Middle East, and Ukraine. Love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help from pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. That's what most of the world is like. I want to just share, because Greeks just do this, I've got my Windex hidden under the table here, with you, 3 words that I think will capture what we believe in Australia. There are 2 words in the Greek language for the human person. Anthropos, so you have your anthropology from that, and prosopo. And anthropos, these are ancient words, so they don't come from Christianity, they don't come from a religion, they come from people that very deeply reflected upon things. Anthropos is from ano theoro. Ano is upwards, and theoria is to contemplate, and so that's where the word theory comes from. So the first word that the ancients used to describe the human person is the creature that is capable of looking to the heavens in order to contemplate what is there. There is no other animal that can bend its neck to look up the way the human person can. So that was the first prerequisite of humanity. And the second word is prosopo, so the face or the person. Pros is towards, and opsi, where you get optometers from, to see. So the second prerequisite of a human being is the creature that is able to look toward the other, and there, in their movement towards the other, find themselves. So first, contemplation of the heavens and what is there, and secondly, the ability to move towards the other and to see oneself in the other. And so I'm going to go with John McKell, my very good friend. Where are you over there? I don't like the word tolerance. I just texted my young chanter from my church that sounded very much like the Imam. I felt like I was in one of my own church services when you were singing the Quran, because we use the same tones, because we share that common history through Byzantium and Ottoman culture. And so I got him to look up the word tolerate. And it comes from the Latin to endure, tolerat. And in the 16th century in English, it means to endure pain. And so I said to him, can you please look up the Greek word andecho, the equivalent, and it's from andi naecho, instead of having that which I would prefer to have. And so it's a very negative word, to tolerate. It means I don't really want you, I have to put up with you. I wish I had something else. So can I ask every politician in the room, now I lost the opportunity with Robert there, stop using this word tolerance and begin to use the word embrace. And so I will end with this other Greek word, because I think it's at the heart of all human relationships. It's the word for forgiveness, to forgive. Sυγχώρηση, να συγχωρέσω. We ask it of God. We ask God to forgive us, and we ask forgiveness of each other. In Greek, sin is not to do the wrong thing. It's the Greek equivalent of the Latin ko, sin. And hora is a place, a space, and choro is a choir. Na chorevso is to dance. It means all of those things. So literally that word, forgiveness, in Greek is to allow the other, after you've contemplated the heavens and you've moved towards the other, because you can see them and you can see beyond your own self. Does that mean my 3 minutes are up? Okay. You move toward the other because you give them the forgiveness, the space to coexist, to dance together, and to sing together. Thank you.
A very valuable 3 minutes, Dimitri. Thank you. I would like now to ask Professor Julie Day-Howell to join us, Professor of Sociology of Religion at Queensland University. Okay, thanks, Julie. Ariel C. Heber, who's the Community Liaison Manager, Queensland Jewish Community Services Incorporated.
Shalom Aleichem. I'm sorry, I'm too tall. I suppose being Jewish, the thing I normally talk about is tradition. And tradition in this country is something interesting because this country is not old enough to have a tradition. We date back 3,400 years since the giving of the Torah. Jews have been sent to every country in the world except for Antarctica. And we have integrated into societies all around the world. It takes time to integrate. Integration is different to assimilation. For all of those who watch Star Trek, assimilation is for the Borg, where everyone becomes mixed in together, you lose your identity and you become beige. Integration is where people come to a society, they bring their food, which is the most important part, their traditions, their ideas, their thinking, and share them with the people that are there. This takes time to happen. In Sydney, I was part of the Jewish South African community. Not that I am South African, I'm actually Australian, but I have a weird accent, so they accepted me very quickly. For an English-speaking South African from Johannesburg to come to Australia and to integrate takes 5 years. That's from when they arrive to you can actually take them somewhere successfully without having to go back and apologise. For anyone who comes from a different country with a different language and a different tradition, it's going to take longer than 5 years. And this country has to be a bit accepting of that. We have to realise it's going to take a period of time for people to learn the traditions. I was born here, I'm 4th generation Australian. I don't know what Australian is. Even if people say to me, that's un-Australian, I said, well, I did it, I'm Australian, it must be. And they say, no, you're Jewish, you're a foreigner. It's like, oh, okay. Go figure. The other problem I find is the distortion. Traditionally, when people met, they sat down, they ate, they shared food, they got on together, they communicated. Reflecting on that today, we don't do that. All we see is what the media presents of these people. I was sitting in South Bank with Imam on Australia Day. We were sitting chatting and he said to me, Ari, they're all going to take photos of the protest of the native Australians coming over the bridge. Why isn't anyone taking a photo of us? And I said, Imam, we're not news. You want to get on the TV? You want to get photos taken? They said, what you do is you stand up and you say in Arabic as loud as possible, my mother makes better hummus than your mother. I will stand up and I will say in Hebrew, no, my mother makes better hummus than your mother. The story, we're going to be blinded by the lights. But the story won't be the great hummus war of 72. It's going to be about Rabbi and Imam, Ma Australia Day celebrations. No truth in it whatsoever. So I feel the media distortion of what we're seeing is causing us more problems than it's worth. I think events like this, I've been coming to them for a few weeks now, are fantastic. The Jewish perspective of mine of Ramadan is you don't eat lunch anymore because people don't accept the fact that you're not fasting. You still have to eat what everyone else eats, otherwise people are offended. I go on a diet after Ramadan. So events like this, events where we go out, Queensland is the first state to ever had a forum of Christian Jews and Muslims, and tonight we have enough members of that here to actually have a meeting. And can you take the minutes, please? My handwriting's dreadful. So with that, I say thank you. I say go out there, we have to meet. I will share a story with you. An imam, a rabbi and a priest walk into a school. Yeah, it's not a joke. It's actually the Together for Humanity Foundation. What they do is they go out, they send in people from the different religions into schools to educate young people that we have more in common, we have commonalities than we have differences. And it'll be great that one day I can stand up and say, an imam, a rabbi and a priest walked into a school and people go, ah, yeah, we saw that program, it was brilliant. So for the politicians here, multicultural and everything, that is one program that you should be actually promoting, not that I push anything. And I think that together we can have harmony. Then when we look in the mirror and reflect, we can see that we are all at peace. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ari, for the humour and the wisdom. Next, we've got Stefan Ambruster, SBS World News, Queensland correspondent.
I don't know if it was planned that a journalist should follow those last few remarks. I'm sorry, Mr Cavalucci had to leave before I could have a go at him. I started in Queensland 8 years ago when SBS, after a 10-year break, recreated the position of a Queensland correspondent. And pretty soon after that, an event occurred. I should say I'm so glad to see so many familiar faces here, including you, Bob, because I'm telling a story that you were involved in as well at that time. Soon after I started the job, there was an Indian doctor who got arrested, and he was charged with terrorism. And it was quite a steep learning curve for me in terms of a whole lot of issues, and one was in terms of how Muslims were perceived in this country and treated by the media. Muhammad Abdullah, who's not here tonight, he took me in straight away, and it was incredible how much love was shown to me by Muhammad and the people he worked with. And he said to me at the time, because SBS is different to the rest of the media, you do things differently, and that's why I'm letting you come in and talk to us, and why I'm helping you with this story and presenting this story. 3 years later, we had some terrible floods here in Brisbane, and once again, I went to Muhammad Abdullah and said, look, I'd like to do some different angles on the story. And he said, look, I've got one for you. Why don't you come down to the Kurubi Mosque? We're taking up collections there, and we're doing what we can to help out the Queensland people who have been affected by the floods. And they collected quite a large sum of money and distributed that to the flood victims. And I did a story on that, and Mustafa Ali, I think he's popped off, but that turned out as a wonderful story, and we, Mustafa and I, we ended up sharing the Queensland Multicultural Award that year for coverage of multicultural affairs. What I'm trying to say is that SBS, we cover these stories. This is our bread and butter stuff. We have a very small bureau here in Queensland. It's actually just me, and so I love to hear your stories. Please don't stop sending me your stories, or calling me, or emailing me, or Facebooking me, or even, thank you, or tweeting me. I won't be able to cover them all. It's quite a big patch I've got, and occasionally I do go out to the Pacific as well. And it's been a pleasure to meet Khaleesi today, who's from Fiji and has come up from Logan. So I've got a big patch to cover. I love hearing your stories. Keep on seeing them through, and I'll do my best to get around to doing them justice. Thank you.
I just thought I'd point out to the Melbourne and Sydney-based SBS team that Queensland goes for quality, not quantity. Jim Chalmers, MP, member for Rankin. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Gail, and thank you to the organisers of tonight. I wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners as well. I also wanted to acknowledge my good friend Peter Khalil, who I've known for some time, and congratulate him and the colleagues from SBS, Jackie and others who've worked together with the QIS and the colleagues from there to put together such a fantastic evening. It's tempting when you follow a speaker with the power and the wit of John McKell just to get up here and say, I agree with everything John said, and then sit down. But I won't do that tonight, because I want to pick up on something that Father Dimitri said. And because I'm here representing the Federal Parliament, also my colleague Jane Prentice, the member for Ryan, who's had to go to a funeral memorial service actually, but I should mention my colleague. She's from the other side of politics, but it was great for Jane to join us tonight. And so representing the federal side of politics, and I'm sure I speak for our state counterparts as well, Father Dimitri, that we will commit not to use that word tolerate anymore. It is not the right word to use in this context. And so I think on behalf of all of us, and I'll check with all of the state colleagues and all the federal colleagues and council colleagues, I think we can commit to using the word embrace. I'm from a very multicultural community, Logan City, and Logan is very well
represented here. You'll forgive me for mentioning at least one of our state MPs, Desley Scott, who's sitting over there at table 4. It's lovely to see Desley as always. She's the state member right in the middle of my federal electorate. And in our community, and just in one federal electorate, we have 188 nationalities in one federal seat. That's the second most multicultural seat behind the seat of Sydney that Tanya Plibersek holds. So we do know a little bit about multiculturalism in our area, and Gail, who does such tremendous work in our community, work that saw her shortlisted for the Australian of the Year award last year. Gail understands that very well with all the work that she does. There's been a lot of talk about faith tonight. I just wanted to briefly touch on another kind of faith, acknowledging the importance of religious faith, but there's another kind of faith, and that's faith in the democratic process. And I wanted to say, and John McKell and I were talking about this just a moment ago, that one of the wonderful things about the multicultural community in Australia is the way that they buy into our democracy. And I don't just say that because they have impeccable taste in federal members of parliament in my area. I say that because you can't go anywhere in my part of the world, and I'm sure people here have very similar stories. You can't go anywhere without people wanting to know how they buy in, how they participate, how they make the most of the democratic opportunity that is provided by Australia, their country that they adopt. And I think that there's an important faith that really the multicultural community can teach a lot of Australians about. Our democratic process gets a hard time. Sometimes that hard time is deserved, let's be honest. But really we do want more people participating in our democracy in the way that our multicultural brothers and sisters do. So I wanted to leave you with that thought. Thank you again for having us here today.
Thank you, Jim. Could we all join together now and collectively thank all of our speakers that came to the platform? Drawing to a close, and I'd like to invite back to the stage Abdul Jalil Galim, Executive Director of the Queensland Intercultural Society, who's going to present a gift to Peter Khalil, who's the SBS Director of Corporate Affairs.
Thank you very much. I can put my mum's dessert on this. Thank you.
Janeth Dean, if you're here. We have one final presentation that's maybe a surprise to you, Bob. Janeth has been holding this for you for quite some time and hasn't had the opportunity and would like to do so now. Can I invite Bob Atkinson to the stage?
This is a great surprise, I must say.
Bob, this is the gift that we've had for. We've had this before Bob was retiring, and for some reason we couldn't deliver it because there was another function on the same night. Right. And this is in appreciation of all the time that you devoted to the Muslim community. You went out of your way to really make us feel important. And we really wanted to give you something personal.
Okay. Can I quickly respond by thanking you for this? Is a great surprise, but I didn't. I look far better than I am. I know I am.
My son Robert did that.
Marvellous, thank you. And I'll treasure this. But can I just say quickly in response, and I'm sure that Ian Stewart would say this as well, and all of my former colleagues, but still friends here, would sometimes, and this is one of such occasions, we are so generously recognised, but the reality is that the reverse, in my humble view, is the truth. The way all of you embrace the police department and members of the police department shows great, I think, leadership on your part, and the way you interact with the community shows great leadership too. Any involvement I had with the Muslim community, which I hope will continue, and other members of our community and society, was one of the most enjoyable parts of my former job. So can I simply thank you for this, thank all of you for your contribution to our society, and wish you well for the future.
A very much loved and appreciated person, and collectively to our police force, I think rightly so. Ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching the conclusion of the program. However, before we do so, can I invite Mr Bill Lenihan, SBS board member, Queenslander, did I add that, to the stage?
I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners, past and present, of the land we stand on. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I think our hosts, QIS and SBS, Peter and Abdul and the teams behind them that put these dinners on, and Gail for her wonderful job tonight. I think a strong round of applause is required. Everybody tonight has been sharing a personal story, and I'd like to share a personal story as well. This is about our family, Irish Catholic upbringing. We were living in Sydney, my wife and I, and our eldest daughter, announced to us that she was marrying a guy from New Guinea. Now, we weren't really particularly happy about that, not particularly about the colour of his skin, but because we don't believe there was anyone out there good enough for our daughter. But they did get married, and they have had two of the most beautiful little boys you would ever want to see, both in nature and in looks. And I think it's a lesson to be learned from within, and a lesson to be learned starting with yourself and with your family. And as Dimitri said, learn to embrace those things. He has turned out to be one of the most wonderful men and one of the most wonderful fathers anyone could ever have, and a great son-in-law. So I think acceptance and embracing are an important part, and dinners like this that people are putting on are an exceptionally great idea, and there should be far more of them. So on behalf of SBS, ladies and gentlemen, and the Queensland Intercultural Society, I'd like to express my appreciation to you for taking the time out to come to this dinner. I know you're all extremely busy. Your presence and your support encourages all to promote goodwill and protect the freedoms and the privileges we enjoy here in Brisbane and indeed Australia. And I think the last week has shown the world how lucky we are in places like we live in here. I wish you all a very good night and a safe trip home, and above all, I wish you all peace. Thank you.
Again, quality, not quantity. We've got a great Queenslander representing a great organisation.
Who are we looking at?
Is that it? Thank you.